Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Ansel, Lindner, Fed Watch, talking everything Bitcoin and central banks. I am joined once again by a special co-host. Maybe he should be a full co-host at this point. Nolan Bauerle. How are you today, Nolan?
I would love the chance, Ansel. I love doing the show with you. And I love the opening credits as well. So they're really neat. And today, how prescient is the title of the show, Fed Watch, right? It's all about, all you got to do is watch. All you got to do is watch. It's like a magician's trick. You got to watch, right? If you can see it, you'll see a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, the thesis behind the show there with the title is that Bitcoin needs to fit in. You know, it's going to change the world, but it also there needs to be some process to get from point A to point B. And so we're watching that process unfold and keeping everybody updated on how Bitcoin is going to take over the system, take over the Fed, I guess you could say. But yeah, we have a big show today. We're going to go over Larry Fink's comments. They kind of rocked the industry. Was it yesterday he just came out? I saw you talked about that this morning, but we're going to go over it from maybe a little different angle. We're going to talk about central bank out of China, the PBOC. They're having a big reshuffle in their personnel. Their chairman, I guess, is really governor of the PBOC, and what we can learn from who's taking over. And lastly, I wanted to take a look at some more CBDC comments. We didn't get to the CBDC story last week, really, but this week there is yet another thing out of all, the ECB or the WEF, whatever they're talking about CBDC. So we're going to cover all of those comments. Yeah. So do you have anything up front that you would like to plug or add admin notes?
No, I'm just happy to be talking about the perfect asset and the times we live in. You know, it's amazing. You spend years fighting people who say, rat poison squared and not good for anything. And then poof, suddenly it's a perfect asset. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to be here to be talking about that on a day like today.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right into the first clip, actually. So we're going to talk about the Bitcoin charts after, but let's pull up the Larry Fink clip and listen to what he had to say. I think it was Fox Business, right? He was on Fox Business.
Yeah, Liz Clayman, I've been on.
All right. So much to talk about in that clip. I mean, he talked about digitizing gold, calling it an international asset, which is the thing I picked out that I thought was the most important. And then he talked about hope. So what's your takeaway from Larry Fink here?
No, I mean, look, he's already showing a sophisticated understanding of Bitcoin if he's talking about it at that level. That's why I think this stuff is kind of funny in a sense, right? That all of a sudden he understands that it's about building a better future. And so he's actually touching on something that I think gets to the heart of why a lot of people are interested in Bitcoin, the narrative behind it, let's say. And these narratives do drive things forward. And that's why someone gets involved in something like Bitcoin or doesn't get involved in something like Bitcoin. So these folks were there creating the narrative that it's not safe for many years, but then all of a sudden, when it's their turn, they demonstrate this really sophisticated understanding. And it is, right? What he's talking about, this idea of a better world. I mean, that's what Bitcoiners rally around, is that it's very easy for us to imagine a better world. And that's even why you have that Bitcoin fixes this meme, right? Once you understand Bitcoin, actually a lot of other problems in the world look like they have a solution. Like it's just a matter of engineering them away after that, right? And aligning incentives, and it should take care of things. So that's always been the problem with fiat. That's really what we're talking about and why we love Bitcoin, because you can't actually imagine an optimistic future based on what Powell is thinking and if Lagarde agrees. So imagine everyone in the world's future is hinged to what is Powell thinking today, and Lagarde and the new one in China, and that's why it's ridiculous.
Or being a gold bug and just being depressed all the time because you think everything's manipulated. Yeah, so Bitcoin is hope. I think he touched on all, most, I would say, 3 of the 4 main narratives for Bitcoin. The one he didn't touch on, of course, was eliminating trusted third parties. So that's a little touchy rail.
That is an astute observation, of course, because they're selling this third party product that is a proxy for Bitcoin. So that's a really good pickup, because it's true, right? They're sitting there almost talking about time preference, about gold standard societies or something he's sort of tapping into. And then even what everyone is seeing these days, just about having a hedge against sovereign debt and not absorbing that risk, which we can all see, right? He's one of the first people, part of this huge financial machinery, that's actually just mentioning the elephant in the room. Like, what if people want to hedge against sovereign debt? Like, they're all pretending like it's not even on people's minds. And then suddenly you hear, like PIMCO, for example, they're only managing $1 trillion. They're not quite there yet, right? They're just saying, oh, bad times ahead. They're not coming out and saying, actually, you might want someone to go and hedge. Because I mentioned PIMCO because they made statements this week exactly along these lines about hope and where things are headed and what they see in the short term, near term for the U.S. economy. So, and if folks out there don't know, Mohammed El Arian, of course, is the lead economist over at PIMCO. So because of him, people listen when they speak, and they're not, they do have opinions. They're not just a go along to get along group, but they're not even there. They're not even talking about what Larry Fink is talking about there. So.
Well, maybe I'll be interested to see if, after they filed their ETF, there was a herding effect where everybody just jumped in right away. I wonder if after these comments, now all these other wealth managers are going to start making very similar comments. What do you think about that?
I think so. I mean, I think the CEO of BlackRock understands, just like Jamie Dimon understands their role in, we don't need to get into an argument about trickle-down economics, but there's trickle-down propaganda. There's trickle-down narrative, right? So when these guys come
what does he know that I don't know?
It's what I sort of read on my show this morning was that Brian Rommel, if people don't know Brian Rommel, you wouldn't if you're just interested in macroeconomics and all that stuff. But he's an interesting fellow. Let me just break him down for a second. He, sort of is even currently recommending home mining and running a Bitcoin node. So he's a sophisticated Bitcoin operator, but he also happens to be one of the lead people in designing personal AI and is one of the lead minds behind how large language models will fit into the world and how they'll function and all that. So Bitcoiner at the cutting edge of AI. And this is what he had to say about what Larry Fink mentioned. And I read this on my show, this morning, 8 a.m., The Breakup, everyone, YouTube, you can see it all over the place. So here's what he said. He goes, to all those that bought into Bitcoin is bad propaganda, meet one of the folks that pulled your strings. Over 10 years of his tenderizing of brains, so you look over there. Meanwhile, your $1,000 could have been $160 million based on the time that this fella was talking about it. And indeed, it even sort of speaks to my own experience. So I was called over to BlackRock offices in 2017 to give them what's going on with Bitcoin and the markets and what does all this mean. And right away, by what floor, it was an invitation, come talk to this person at BlackRock. I did that for a few of these folks on Wall Street in those years. And so, just based on the floor you're headed to, it's probably important and all that. And so already with the these weren't just like, what is Bitcoin, people, right? They had really sharp questions and had really sophisticated things they wanted to know about. And so already I knew that they were not, whatever was coming out of their offices, very similar to what was coming out of Jamie Dimon's offices, was not out of his mouth, had no bearing on reality with what was going on inside the business. And I think him coming out with these talking points, this is a marketing ploy for the new product. I mean, the only reason why Larry Fink is out there talking this up on Liz Clayman's show is because you got to start the marketing process. And, take Twitter, for example, or any of Elon Musk's companies. When people say, what is he going to do when he fires the marketing department? Well, none of his companies have marketing departments, including Twitter now. That was one of the groups that he got rid of. None of them. He never hires a marketer. He's the marketer, right? If it's an MMA fight or whatever. So,
well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I was thinking that this was lobbying the SEC. So you're saying it's kind of like marketing for the new ETF. I can totally see that. But what about lobbying the SEC? Like, he's going out there in public, making the market expect this from BlackRock.
Yeah, it's the same thing. This is persuasion of the highest order.
Yes,
done by an actual magician, like the best people in the world doing this, right?
Right.
This is what military grade persuasion looks like. This is it.
Does this make you think it's more likely for approval than maybe 3 days ago?
To me, it shows conviction of persuasion, which means that I don't see them letting it go, even if something happens. Like, I saw there was some processing wrinkle this past week that caused everyone to refile, which was just being transparent about Coinbase's role in the redemption side of the application. So if it continues to be like that, that model of, oh, look, there's this problem and we're just going to keep adapting until this thing steamrolls the process. I think they have other tricks up their sleeves. Like, I don't know how the ETF piece of pre-approvals work. They probably don't work exactly for Bitcoin, but I bet you there is a way for them to use their discretionary mandate, which they were awarded 3 years ago in the ETF field, to create their own ETFs without going through the SEC. I bet you there's even something there. I don't know. I'm making that up, but I just imagine that they're going to be creative until they get it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to elaborate on that a little bit. So the ETF updates I think it was last Friday, they came out and said that they need to refile with who the Bitcoin exchange is going to be. Even BlackRock didn't have that on their thing initially. They talked about Coinbase for custody, but not as who was going to be in their surveillance sharing agreement. Within 12 hours, I think, pretty much all of them had refiled. There was some confusion at first because the ones that are using CBOE as the exchange, they were public about their refiling right away, but NASDAQ was not. Like, NASDAQ didn't even care to publish it. It kind of like got swept under the table until midweek this week. So a lot of them, I think, refiled within 12 hours of that update. One thing that was interesting was that in BlackRock's filing, they said they have already been, like, the surveillance sharing agreement with Coinbase is already active as of 16 June, and no other ETF filing had that. So that is still one leg up from BlackRock on the competition. Then I also heard just today or yesterday, is her name Kathy Wood from ARK?
ARK, yeah.
Yeah, and she said that she thinks they are going to get approved first because there is this precedence with the SEC that they will approve in order of filing. So that would be interesting if ARK actually beat BlackRock to the finish line. But like I said there, BlackRock already has this explicit agreement set up with Coinbase, and all the other applications seemed like they were just going to get a surveillance sharing agreement with Coinbase, not like they already had one lined up. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the mechanics of it. I realize that the benefit of this, let's say, shortcut that ARK hopes to use, I mean, it's more just sophisticated buy side jockeying to be first. It's a bit of a vanity play, I would imagine, like to be the first. I don't know how much market difference it'll make. We're talking about Bitcoin here, so the most interesting subject in finance. So you're going to continue to see people interested and want to learn more from whoever their manager or financial institution they're used to dealing with. Because this is probably a generational divide in this product interest, right? Let's be honest. This is about a lot of the inheritance that's out there. This is a lot of boomer money. But we're very interested in generational transfers around here, right? We're very interested in the subject. I continue to see it sort of merging with all these other narratives that are going to come out to play in 2024, right? Real estate, that story is nowhere near what it's going to be. I saw Balaji this week talking all about the insurance industry also being, more or less bankrupt, like insolvent, right? So I think you're going to see these, it's almost like what we're experiencing is the problem is so big and has been since Silicon Valley Bank and all those other people are there. And, I actually had a different thought about it today. When people said, oh, it was a conspiracy against our industry. Well, maybe it's our industry saying, well, where's the money? Because like we're first to ask those questions if we have a normal banker. And there's a sort of self-selection here where Bitcoiners who understand the problems of fractional reserving and then noticing that our financial institutions had trouble is not necessarily a conspiracy. It could just be that there's a self-selection of people who understand that if that happened at any other financial institution today, the money's not there. If they go and ask for the money in the insurance companies or the banks across the United States, it's the same as Silicon Valley. It's the same as Signature. It's the same as all of the banks that were adjacent to crypto. The difference is the clients were aware of the scam and asked for the money, right? So, those narratives, I think, are going to continue to grow in importance once the new bailout products come out, right? Treasury really did affect Fed's ability to be taken seriously, let's say, right? And I think all the people that are predicting, Q3, Q4 trouble for these big brand names, unless there isn't another intervention, are sort of right on the money.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point too, but we don't know if it matters who's going to be first or who's going to be second, whatever. But I was reading, his name is James Seifert, I think, and he works with Bloomberg, and he said that he thinks this is going to be the largest ETF launch in history. And just a couple months ago was the largest, and it took in $2 billion on the first day.
Yeah, very, very typical of Bitcoin to get that record.
Yeah, so if Bitcoin gets $2 billion coming in a single day, that's what they're fighting over. They're fighting over who's going to get that first
day. Yeah.
So anyway,
so that's a temporary fight. It's like it's for a little battle. It's a spoil of war, more or less, right?
True. Well, that's all I have on the ETF stuff. Let's jump into the charts now. Let's look at what Larry Fink's comments did to the charts. So if we could pull up that first one, slide numero uno. And this is the 4-hour chart. And you can see that at the very end there on the far right, it looked like it was about to break out. It actually set a new high, but then it got smashed back down. And we'll see where the day ends up. But for right now, we've set a new high, a new swing high, and a new monthly low on the same day. So that's a pretty interesting price action. I was expecting more upside after Larry Fink said those words yesterday in the interview. But it also looks a little bit like manipulation. Like let's just let it get a new high by just a few dollars. Everyone's going to be really bullish, and then we're going to smash it down. The last minute, I think, maybe smash before they let people ride it up. So what are your thoughts on the last maybe 24 hours?
That's what that looks like to me. It looks like the people who are doing the churning, taking an opportunity to do some churning when they know there's going to be some interest, demand, a little bit of news to buy or sell. So that's typical of the degens that are behind all this stuff.
Yep, one more flush before they let it go higher. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Since we are starting a new quarter and a new month and a new half year, I put some longer term charts in here. So this is the quarterly chart. You can see that red bar that we've been talking about for a long time on like the weekly chart. And then the dashed red line, that's at the the quarterly resistance. So that is the next spot up. But it just looks like we're setting up on the launch pad. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. I mean, it's again, it's my fourth now. This will be my fourth market cycle as a professional. And you sort of just get a sense of the feeling and the energy, and all of a sudden you just start seeing these dominoes clicking and momentum building. So that's what I feel. I don't see any reason to deviate from all of my Bitcoin plans in 2024. I see nothing there that's telling me we're off schedule.
All right, let's go to the monthly chart. That's the next one. And this, you can also see this pressure building. To me, it just seems like everything is lining up. We've talked about it on this show. You talk about it on your show all the time. But not only are the financial dominoes lining up, but the social dominoes are lining up. The political dominoes are lining up. And it just seems like this is about ready to pop and break out of here. I'm still sticking with my predictions that we're going to be much higher by the end of this quarter, Q3, and then reassess at the end of Q3, because we probably will run into some global macro issues at that point. So any comments on the monthly chart?
Yeah, I can totally imagine that optimistic Q3, but there is still another global event on the horizon, whether it's a bailout of US banks and insurance companies along the lines of what Balaji's talking about. I know I'm anticipating, Bitcoin Amsterdam, October 12th to 13th in Amsterdam, obviously. That's something I'm already trying to sort of program for, is to anticipate content around these issues. So we've already got Balaji signed up, so we're going to have Balaji talking about this then. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be on the right course as far as understanding what's going on with these big happenings.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have for the charts. Let's jump into the CBDC comments. So this was, to be honest with you, I don't know his title, but he is speaking, I believe, at the WEF, and he's going into, what they like about CBDCs, that they can control everybody with it. They can make it expire, go bad.
What they said was not part of it.
What's that?
What they said was not part of it. No,
oh, yeah.
I'm working on expiration. No.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. We won't do all of these awesome things that we really think are cool. We won't do those. Yeah. But let's go ahead and play that clip, please.
And the one final note I will make is that if you think about the benefits of digital money, there are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it, or a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
Yep. So I don't know. I think it's so wacky. It's so wacky. And so
is it? It sounds like food stamps to me. Honestly, it sounds like food stamps.
It's so dark. Like he said, you can even look at the darker side. It's so dark that I almost don't even take it seriously as an option. I don't think the people will go for it. And like CK and I think are on the right page, that we don't think that they will ever launch a major CBDC like this. But you're on the other side. So what are your arguments for why they would even be able to launch something this dystopian?
It's not my arguments for. Like this is not something I want to see or agree with or think is a good idea or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
But the more political you make fiat money, the more you're going to see, sort of my thesis, and I think a lot of people's thesis, more or less, people that want to preserve wealth, like the Larry Finks, will start to understand that Bitcoin is for people who want wealth preservation, financial management, and basically demonstrating their financial literacy and what it takes to survive in this world. Now, there remains a group of people that simply will not deal with the decay of the fiat system, with the amount of upheaval of worldview that is required in order to accept this. There's a huge ego sort of barrier. All these economists and know-it-alls and the journalists are even worse. And so all of these people that are going to have a lot of trouble handling what's going on and they're not really going to be able to make it in whatever the world is turning into. So I can just easily imagine that UBI or something like it will exist that will make political money explicit. It will be explicitly political money. Now, they no longer get to just print unlimited amounts, right? There's it's a whole recalibration of things, but I foresee the US dollar will survive as exactly what it is becoming, food stamps. And these will be more sophisticated food stamps, but I imagine that everything he's saying is going to be the truth. I think it will have sort of sin tax implications, right? Food stamps do to this day. They don't necessarily let you get the sugary thing. They make you get what they say is healthy, right? Even though I've seen what's on food stamp lists, it's nothing healthy. This idea that there will be a can buy and can't buy and government cheese, right? Everyone knows government cheese in America. I bet you your US dollars that are purely political will buy a lot. There'll be deals on government cheese, right? It'll be backed by government cheese. I'm not kidding. Right?
Well, I mean, but isn't there a difference between the people accepting it and so let me try to restate.
I'm talking about the buy-in. The buy-in comes when it becomes food stamps. Like you have to go there to get it. So it's not imposed on you. The trade-off is here, like you're in charge. You tell me what to do with my money. Put it in the money.
Right, but I don't think the normal person matters. Their adoption doesn't really matter to me. I think that only the big money matters.
I agree with that. No. This is like the way the printing press was. Sorry, not the printing press. This is the way the printer was for the personal computer. It's like a halfway station. Like the first computers needed a printer to be useful because we didn't have an internet and we didn't have social media and we didn't have high resolution screens all in our pockets, so we needed this sort of middle ground, right? So I've always interpreted stable coins actually as exactly that. The minute the stable coin first came out, I said, oh, this is a printer, right? This is as the printer was to the personal computer. It's not going to be here forever, but it's very useful for the first iterations of what computers were. The original word processing software helped you make invites to parties or community notes at the grocery store where you could take a number and sell your services. These were really big innovations at the time that allowed these things to take off. That was the whole, remember they laughed at Steve Jobs for insisting on having so many fonts on the Mac word processing software. And everyone said, well, you need like 4. What are you talking about? He says, no, that's the whole business. That's the whole game. It's that, right? It's fonts. And of course he was right. And the printer helped bridge that gap. But as you go on, that's why you still can't buy a good printer to this day, because they don't matter anymore. They're stupid. Like you can't buy, they haven't figured out the product in 60 years almost now, 50 years, I guess, 40 something years, sorry, 80s, not that long, 40 something years. But of course, because, it just speaks to the corporate rot. Who are they being made for? The printers these days. They're not being made for consumers. They're being made for shareholders of heavily financialized companies that are completely abstracted from the user. And that's why we can't have a printer anymore, because it's one of the most bloated, stupid products left from the fiat world, like literally obsolete. Like they can't make a good one anymore. So, this whole shift and change, I think anyway, will lead people to something like a printer halfway situation that won't exist forever. But that can exist for a while, where a stable coiny kind of digital currency that has the programmability and the relationship between an authoritarian expert class and a consumer.
And Bitcoin.
And a consumer. No. Bitcoiners we're out of this. We've subtracted ourselves from the problem. Right?
Yeah, but are you saying that the CBDC is a middle step between?
To a Bitcoin standard, yes. Yeah, because that's a rotten rump, and will just continue to degrade, and if it survives at all. I could be wrong. Right. I could be wrong. It could just never happen, and everyone could sort of calibrate to a Bitcoin standard much, much quicker. But in my version of events, and I could be completely wrong, I see the energy companies and the financial industry being the first to measure their industries on Bitcoin, just psychologically, and not measure their industries in dollars any longer, because who would measure their wealth or output in food stamps? And once that's explicit, right, then whatever happens to the dollar. I mean, what are you going to do with the fake news journalists? What are you going to do with them? Like, are they going to get a job? They're not going to learn to code, right? It's not happening.
No, they're going to learn how to do ChatGPT, AI prompts and all that stuff. But so when I listen to that guy, that Indian guy there, I just think like the big money is saying no way. Like he's scaring off. He's scaring off the big money.
This is political money that he's describing. This is money for managerial class people, not wealthy people. This is managerial class people. This is the people who bit on the late 20th century roadmap to success, which is go get highly credentialized and then get a job in the public sector and then get a job in the industry that you regulated in the public sector and then oscillate between public and private sector, making your way as an expert, right? That was the battle plan, and that won't function at all with food stamp money. That's broken.
All right, let me lay another theory on you. So BRICS, they have this gold currency supposedly. We don't know if this is going to happen. I've seen different things just in the last couple of days saying people coming out that should know, like insiders are saying no, this isn't going to happen, but everybody thinks it's going to happen. And then Davos, the global Marxists, they really want a CBDC, and that puts Wall Street and Larry Fink and Chairman Powell and these other people all on the same team. What other team do they have? They have Bitcoin. So maybe that is why we're seeing this switch from BlackRock kind of signifies this BRICS versus Davos versus Wall Street. And I think that is fairly compelling. What do you think?
I think that's exactly what we're seeing here, right? I think we're seeing a both clash of political systems and indeed people say, oh, the Chinese thing isn't going to work. That's not the value of it. The value of it that I see is these other countries expressing their interest to settle in something other than the dollar for energy. And since the petrodollar stopped being so, what's the word? Stop being since it stopped being the end all be all sacred cow of U.S. imperialism, which sort of ended around the COVID time, right? So since COVID, you've been seeing countries express an interest to do a thing that was not even allowed to be said out loud 20 years ago. When Saddam Hussein said, I'm going to settle oil and the petrodollar on euros, Gaddafi didn't get to do it. Anyone who said there is another market for oil, it was over. Now, the truth is, it started in 2020 with countries saying we're going to do other markets for oil. The U.S. pulled out of that part of the world from a militaristic point of view. All assets have been sort of moved closer to the European field of engagement. There are no more boats in the Strait of Hormuz. There's oil tankers getting pirated that you never hear about, right? They're getting pirated. Like there's Korean ships getting pirated and Japanese ships getting pirated. This did not happen 5 years ago, ever. It didn't happen. It's happening all the time now. There became a international demand by various countries, big ones, to say they want something else or they want nuclear. All this nuclear talk you're seeing around the world is not coincidental, right? All of a sudden, people are starting to embrace nuclear energy since the U.S. got into all of its trouble, right? And I think that's going to continue. So you're seeing an expression of desire for something else. And exactly as you said, that's where Bitcoin sits in the exact right position to take advantage of some of the most interesting new buyers that exist on planet Earth, the energy people and the rich people, right? Yeah. Now, it's not pretty as far as the way to get to hyper-Bitcoinization. It's not what not every pleb hoped for hyper-Bitcoinization to happen because there was massive global adoption of every pleb in China and every pleb in America. But, it wasn't always going to be that way. And I think that you're going to get these folks first, and that was always going to be the game. And who even knows what other tricks they have up their sleeves? Like we're dealing, again, with what I said originally about Larry Fink. You're dealing with military-grade persuasion here. And
4D chess or whatever, 5D chess.
Who knows?
Well, I think like a lot of the talk, recently in realist camps, like geopolitical realists, they talk about a multipolar world, and they have the US versus China versus Russia. There's no unipolarity anymore, where it's just like from 1990 onward, it was just the United States as the main superpower. But I think it's a little bit different. And like I just laid out there, it could be BRICS versus Davos versus Wall Street.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily US versus China versus Russia, because everything is corporations.
Yeah.
And that's where the money is. And so I would say if those are the three teams, BRICS, Davos, and Wall Street, which team would you want to be on? I wouldn't want to be on BRICS. I wouldn't want to be on Davos. So
No, of
that
course
leaves
it's
only
Wall Street.
Wall Street. Yeah.
And it's a fair way to frame it all. And a very cynical way of seeing the world right now, but I don't think it's wrong, is to think of it all as post-Soviet crash Russia, where we are dealing with oligopolies and international cartels and all kinds of interests looking for a new order. And it's exactly what, for example, Sovereign Individual predicted, that these organized crime networks and all of these people would gain more sway in international affairs because of the changing logic of violence and all of these things. So indeed, there's, I'm not saying the world is like Russia, exactly. I just use it as a frame of the Wild West sort of chaotic moment that we're experiencing right now to understand it. It's not exactly the same. It just makes
it's a breakup, if you will.
It's a breakup. It's a breakup. It's a breakup. 8 a.m. every day.
All right. Well, let's get into this China story. So China, the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, they are obviously not, they don't have any independence like our Federal Reserve has semi-independence, right? But we were just talking about Chairman Powell as part of Wall Street, because the Fed is owned by Wall Street. They're run by Wall Street and not necessarily by Washington, but there is some oversight there. And you can believe that or not, or have different ideas on the spectrum there, but there is some independence, where in the PBOC, there is no independence. It's a straight line from the party down to the Communist Party chief of the PBOC, like I have here on this slide. Under them would be the PBOC governor, and they're kind of like the chairman. These used to be the same people. The Communist Party chief and the governor is two titles with the same person, but over the last, I think, 8 to 10 years, they've divvied it up between two people. And then you have the deputy governors underneath them. Well, see, you can see on this slide, the old structure was, I'm not even going to try to say these names, but Pan was the deputy governor. He was also in charge of things like their foreign exchange rate setting body. So he did all the stuff with their foreign exchange reserves and open market operations and stuff like that. It's kind of like being the head of the New York Fed, who does the open market operations. So that's what he has done. He also was big into setting the 3 red lines policy for the real estate a couple years back that caused preceded the big crash in the real estate market over there. And he also was in charge of tech crackdown and crackdown on Bitcoin going back a couple years. So he has had his hands dirty as deputy governor for a long time. Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, they kicked these top 2 people off, Yang Gang and Guo, and put Pan as the party chief and governor, reuniting those titles in the PBOC. It's a very interesting move. A lot of people don't know exactly how to take it, other than there's some panic going on. I mean, these jobs were just set at the party Congress, if you remember, like 6 months ago, when Xi became emperor for life, right? And now, just 6 months later, they're switching it all up, kicking these guys out and putting Pan as number 1, this kind of hardliner. The idea that I've heard from people that I listen to, like Jeff Schneider and stuff, is that it's because the yuan is crashing. So if we can go to the next slide, I believe, or the chart, go down to the next one. You can see this is the yuan. We've talked about it for the last couple weeks, and it continues to slide. It's pretty much last week it closed at a new like 15-year low, but it's still, just back in, what is that, 2019 or 2018 that it hit actually an intra-week low. But yeah, so the yuan is crashing. I think they're panicking over the yuan. I've said that they can't do their stimulus because with a closed capital account, all of that money stays in the system, and it will just lead, directly to debasement of the yuan. So they can't stimulate. Their economy's kind of crashing, and so they're between a rock and a hard place here. So Nolan, any comments on this whole development?
Yeah, and so I had no idea about the change in leadership and have not been following it. But indeed, everything you say, sort of jives with my understanding of what is going on over there. Now, as I, just so I can sort of put it in place. So the PBOC also is integrated, or I should say the big four, the Japanese state banks, the commercial banks, the big four. So the commercial development, agricultural, I can't remember exactly which ones they are. Those things are the ones that would normally handle stimulus and they would sort of put this money to work, let's say, right? But all they really know how to do is build another bridge, another fake city, another construction project. So they're sort of done with being able to directly finance these big projects, as I understand, right? Like they're all leaking money as it is. They're all having trouble. Now, what I don't see here is all of these rumors about the insolvency of the smaller banks in Japan, the ones who deal with the big four commercial ones. Because as I understand, now it could be a psyop, it could be total fake news. But as I understand, people in China right now are trying to get money out of these various banks, can't, and then are disappearing when they bring up the question of another bank being insolvent, another bank being insolvent. So now I don't want to be the person spreading any fake news whatsoever. This is 100% unverified internet. Don't believe a word you see. I have no clue. And it's very easy to sell fake ideas about what's going on in China because they don't have access and connection to the internet. So
right.
It's actually easier than you think to paint a picture of craziness in China. So look, they're weirdly, with the BRICS 2 meeting coming up in August, no matter what, we can say that Chinese banking is a national security interest at this point and is part of what I see as the battlefield of World War III, which is sort of psychological and economic warfare as the premier battlefronts, more than machines running into each other with fiery missiles. So what I see is China not doing great in World War III and having a lot of trouble on the economic front. And, that's what I see.
Yeah. So the regional banks, there's a lot out about them. You're right. They have the big four, and then this Pan that's taking over as the head of the PBOC, he actually is responsible for IPOing two extremely big banks. I think they're the two largest IPOs globally. And he was the one that was responsible for launching that. So he has some market understanding. He actually has experience cracking down on different industries all over the place, getting the hard work done. He knows the plumbing of the FX market because he's in charge of their FX open market operations desk. So I think it all comes down to the yuan, and they're scared about the yuan. Now going back to the regional banks, they're doing all sorts of crazy schemes right now. So they're lending to themselves, or they're lending to their next door regions banks. They're also cooking different schemes up to save a lot of these real estate giants that are having a hard time refinancing or rolling over debt, or doing things like that. They're doing all these crazy schemes. The real estate market is just barely hanging on by a thread. There's a lot of stuff going on with Chinese banks. Another thing I'll also say is that China extended a lot of loans, and I don't know which, if these were regional bank loans, if these were big bank loans or what, but China has been financing a lot of stuff like in Africa, a lot of the infrastructure. Well,
I think that is the either construction bank or the industrial and commercial bank. Those two of the big four have been the heavy ones behind that.
yeah, and now all these African countries are unable to pay their debts, and the IMF is like, we're not going to come in and save you, country, because you took out stupid loans from China. Now you have to pay them back. If you can work out a restructure agreement, then we can give you new loans. But you got to work that out with China, and China's been unwilling to take haircuts on a lot of these things. So these are non-performing loans, basically, that have gone to produce unproductive infrastructure in Africa, right at the time when all this BRIC stuff is happening, when the yuan is crashing. I mean, it is just one thing after another stacking up against China. And it sounds like I'm like not worried about China because they are kind of a paper tiger, but when you back somebody into a corner, that's when they're going to lash out. And I think that makes them even more dangerous on the international scene, from everything from trade tariffs, tariffs and trade bans like we saw with some of the rare earth metals this week, but also when it comes to like Taiwan and stuff. There's going to be less rationality in their foreign policy, and that's never a good place to be.
Well, but you got to also pay attention to what's going on in Taiwan right now. Taiwan does not want to be Ukraine, and with the American, Janet Yellen has been sent there right now. She's over there, right? She's our big plan. Janet Yellen is going to save China-America relations. She's the envoy. But look out, because in Taiwan, the pro-China parties are winning in all the polls. And the reason is they don't want to hear about America coming for their democracy fortification stuff. They're not interested, right, in America lending a hand. Didn't look good to them, right? They don't want the deal Ukraine got. And, now I think our solution over there is what Vivek Ramaswamy, who spoke at Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, who's running for the Republican nod, he's got all we need to do with Taiwan. It's the simplest solution, right? Just introduce them to the Second Amendment and supply what is needed over there, right? Handguns, rifle, whatever you need. It'll be great for American arms makers. It'll help American arms makers with the bottom line. And I don't imagine any guerrilla warfare is going to be happening in Taiwan after that, right? That's American exceptionalism at its best. So there are creative ways around the trouble in Taiwan. But again, I talked about it yesterday, and I know it's sensitive for people, but inevitably, it's not America. It's not America. Lincoln already blinked. He already said we do not want a unified Taiwan we do not want separate countries. We want a unified situation. That is the official policy of the United States, and I can't imagine it changing.
Yeah, it's interesting when, like you just mentioned, Blinken there, and how he reestablished the status quo. Did we talk about this a couple weeks ago? I think we might have talked about that on this show. But yeah, I think that the U.S. is there's a lot of stuff going back and forth. What's up?
Fetterman and Yellen, it just came up on stage.
Oh my God. Yeah, she is like the worst representative. But yeah, she's in Beijing right now, and guess what? Xi wasn't even there. He went to do a speech to his troops saying, "Be ready for war." So,
well, so there have been a few people, and I'm no China expert, but my frame for China has long been Xi knows what the demographics are there. And now, just as a note, it's happened already this year. China is no longer officially the most populous country in the world. That was already handed over to India, which is now officially the most populous country in the world. So for our entire lives, it's been China. Now, there are some people who think that the population numbers in China are way worse. And a new demographic has come out that has revised those numbers again. And that was just 2 weeks ago, or last week, or very recently. So this is already after losing. This is months after losing the number one country title. Mm-hmm. They've already dropped down to have fewer. There's some people who think it's even less, that they're under a billion person population, that there's a population the size of America, right? 300 and something million people that are not really there. And so,
multiple studies have found that.
Multiple. And now we don't know. There is no way to know unless you're doing it yourself and you run the satellites and you figure it out. So, but the only person who could know, I think, is Xi, and I think he does know. And so I've been operating under that presumption the whole time. Only Xi knows the real numbers. Only Xi understands the true position of China. And so for that reason, you can imagine he's got to be creative here. And indeed, he has abandoned all form of economic propaganda. Like the propaganda around China has changed since he was voted in for life. The economic plank is gone. It's all about chauvinism and macho-ness and military thing and pumping their movies, for example. American movies. Notice that American movies are not just having bad box offices in China. They're getting slandered in the media first, right? So,
really?
Yeah, the Little Mermaid was slandered in the media first, in the official media, saying we don't want race swapping and American race politics, because of course, if people don't know, they did a thing in the Little Mermaid, and who cares? That's the boring side. But that's what they picked up on over there, and of course, the movie tanked, lost Disney a fortune, right? Indiana Jones tanking in China, tanking. They don't want it. They don't want it, and the government has been involved in that. They are now promoting their domestic box office as a point of pride that they're making stronger films and attracting more of an audience. So it's joined into the propaganda, and they're even explicitly calling Hollywood out as propaganda now. You didn't hear that before.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I have on the China situation. The last story I do have is the reverse repo. You probably were following this. Yeah, it's back. You probably were following this like 2 years ago, like I was, and it went out of the news because it's been flat. But now, just recently, it started dipping again. And so let's bring up that chart.
So what's the overnight number right now?
It's 1.8 trillion.
Oh, that's it. Oh,
yeah, it got as high as I think 2.2 or something like that.
And this is daily, right? This is daily.
I think this comes out every Wednesday, I believe.
No, pardon me. The contracts are daily. The reverse repo is an overnight, and it just keeps rolling forward and growing, or slightly shrinking.
Yeah, there are different lengths of contracts, like 7 days, 14 days, and 30 days. But I think it's something like 75% of them are overnight. So
this is the overnight rate to which everything is pegged, more or less, in the economy, right? This is the backbone of all benchmarks in the system.
Yeah, this was meant to be a floor. So everything there should be no logical reason for any interest rate to be below what you can get in reverse repo. But of course, we know that's not the case.
Now again, I just want to point viewers to this, funny little bump you see in 2020 September in that gray band. Mm-hmm. And I went on TV in that time, and people would say, "Oh, you silly Bitcoiners, don't you understand? This is technical. It's technical. Don't you know anything?" Right? They made, we were the only ones asking questions about this. We said, well, I think this either has to grow by a crazy amount, or the system is broken. And so, we were the only ones who got it right. This was 25 billion a day back then.
Yeah.
And now we're at 2 trillion. Wow.
So for those that in the audience that don't know what the reverse repo is, it's when banks have a lot of extra cash and they take it and they park it at the Federal Reserve overnight. So they lend it to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve gives them treasuries, collateral. And then they also charge the Federal Reserve a small little fee, or the Federal Reserve has to pay an interest rate on it. Mm-hmm. So this is basically $2 trillion that's being parked at the Fed, and now it's starting to come out of the Fed. So I haven't quite wrapped my head around the implications of this, but a lot of people are saying that there is going to be, this is money that's flowing out into the economy. It's going back into deposits at banks. It's going to lead to higher inflation numbers and stuff like that. So we'll have to see if that is the case. I'm very skeptical of that. I think this is kind of a sign, perhaps, of they don't need as much collateral right now because the Treasury has been They went out and refilled their TGA, and they're selling a lot of bonds right now. So maybe it's the fact that they don't need as much collateral. So we'll see what happens in the next, say, 3 months to this total. If it keeps dipping, we'll have to revisit this and see what people are saying.
I mean, I've always interpreted this as kind of a defibrillator in the sense, sort of like just like a jolt of money, because the banks they can't make money. So this is a way to like make the whole thing go round. It was like free money because it's just the overnight rate on $2 trillion. But what is the overnight rate on $2 trillion? It's millions of dollars, right? It's millions of dollars being given, created, paid to the banks for simply existing. There's nothing else achieved at all. And they can take that money every day and do crazy shit, right?
Well, at the beginning, I interpreted this as a need for collateral, because collateral is kind of like the red blood cells in the circulatory system. You need this collateral to move money around. And if you just have cash, if everyone has cash, there's just no give and take. There's no movement in the plumbing of the system.
The velocity is down, you mean?
Yeah.
The velocity of money,
So to have actual circulation of money in the economy, you need to have both collateral and cash. Well, if they have a mismatch, they have too much cash, not enough collateral, they would go into the reverse repo, get collateral out and stuff like that. So if people are not needing as much collateral, what does that mean? Like I said, I haven't quite wrapped my head around this yet, but I will definitely report on it next week.
Yeah. I've never been able to understand the implication. Even when I did television around this in 2020 in the Repo Rumble in September, or 2019, pardon me. At that time, I indeed did not understand the implications. I just said, "What is this? How come this is happening? And this doesn't look good." And no one could explain it. It was like, "Oh, technical, you're stupid." And I was like, well, I had honest questions.
Nobody knows how this works.
Nobody knows.
The Federal Reserve doesn't even know how this works. So, but okay, Nolan, we got to wrap it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Guys, my name is Ansel Lindner. You can check my website out, bitcoinandmarkets.com, where I do my own independent podcast and do a weekly newsletter over there. So check that out. Nolan, where can they find you?
You can find me here on YouTube. You can find me on Rumble, where it's delayed. I publish every day on Nostr, but not live. You can find me live on YouTube and Twitter and the Bitcoin Magazine channel and my own channel, Count BTC. Thanks, everyone.